Ladies and gentlemen, this is Joe's Classic Video Games back with another cool pinball repair video for you this evening. We have been working on this really cool Bally 8 Ball Deluxe limited edition pinball machine that a customer brought us. And basically, it's in pieces. There's all kinds of pieces here. Even the wiring was out of it. So on the previous video, we looked over everything that we had, tried to figure out what was going on, and we were able to replace the main AC wiring harness, and basically all we got done was we got some light bulbs to light up on the front of the cabinet. So the cabinet stuff is back in there. So today on this video, we're going to keep working through it and put in, I suppose, this harness, or figure out where it goes or whatever. We're going to do the next part of it, right? So that's where we're going to end up. I kind of want to get to where we can test some voltages on the power supply too. I guess we already can, although the most of the harness isn't plugged into that yet. But it's a new Golf pinball replacement power supply. So because of that, it should have all of its voltages, but we'll see. But whenever the voltage leaves there, the first thing that it does is it gets up here to this solenoid driver board. So that would be our next stop for the wiring. We talked with the customer, Kevin. We called him and figured out what was going on with this transformer. We were mentioning in the previous video that it looked like it had been changed, and the other transformer is down at the bottom. This particular one doesn't have an extra tap, a 110 tap, for a ballast and a starter to run the fluorescent lamps that are supposed to be in the head. So originally there were 3 fluorescent light bulbs up here. This head apparently is off of a Miss Pac-Man, Mr. and Mrs. Pac-Man, which uses the same small head. And then the neck he didn't have, so he had one made. So it's kind of been put back together. He's taken parts off of one to make a 8 Ball Deluxe limited edition, which, if you don't know, is a pretty valuable machine and great. I always stand here and look. There's somebody backing up out front. It looked like they were about to back right through the glass of the building, but apparently not. It was an optical illusion. Everything's fine. Where was I? So that's why this board has been remade. It's because in Mr. and Mrs. Pac-Man, that's different. Also in Mr. and Mrs. Pac-Man, they don't need the fluorescent thing. So this is the transformer out of that. He said that he thought that the transformer that was in it had some kind of problem, but he's not sure. So we're actually not going to put fluorescent lamps in the back. We're going to put some LED lamps in the back. So because of that, you can just wire those up to 5 volt or 12 volt, whatever it is. And you don't need that ballast and the starter and all of the wiring for the fluorescent lamps. So we'll get to that whenever we get to that. So let me look at this harness and figure out what it is and where it goes and all of that. He was mentioning that he was worried about there was a ground strap that needs installed. And we'll figure all that out as we go along too. So basically we've done everything in the cabinet. We're now moving up into the neck and the head of the machine. Alright, so this harness, it has a tag on it that says 8 Ball Deluxe, and it has some lights here that are the ones that attach here. And I've got the original board there that is definitely off an 8 Ball Deluxe, and there's the same number of lights as on there. So I believe that's the correct harness. We've got 2 of these inserts that do the displays. So if you've never seen these, the displays are right here, and there's just a back glass up here. On Mr. and Mrs. Pac-Man, on Rapid Fire, on 8 Ball Deluxe Limited Edition, and on Centaur 2. So we've got 2 of these neck boards. This one says Centaur on it. This one doesn't say anything. So I'm going to look at some pictures and see which one of these 2 we're supposed to use, if they're the same or what. I mean, you can see that the light baffles are different. On this one there's 6 bulbs and 1 in the middle, and then over here there's only 3. So let's see if we can figure out what 8 Ball Deluxe needs, and then we'll put the other one up. So we did some videos here on our channel of a Rapid Fire if you want to see this thing being played. where we fixed one and then played it. And it has this logo in the middle of that area. So I don't have either one of those because all of ours have a display in the middle. So it was not the board, the display board for a Bally Rapid Fire. So they came up with Rapid Fire as an answer to Hyperball, or Hyperball was before Rapid Fire, or was after Rapid Fire. I can't remember which one was which. I think Rapid Fire was the ripoff, but I can't remember. Hyperball was made by Williams, by the great Steve Ritchie. And they thought that this Rapid Fire was going to be like the greatest selling game of all time, and it was not. So they only made like 5,000 of them, but they made a whole bunch of cabinets thinking, oh, it's a new thing. It's not a pinball game, it's a arcade game. And a lot of the arcade games actually sold a lot more cabinets than the pinball machines did. So they thought that it was just going to sell a ton of games because it wasn't a pinball machine. It has a turret that shoots balls, and it had just lights on a playfield is basically what you're shooting at. Very cool game, but it wasn't real popular. So they ended up left with a bunch of cabinets, and so they started thinking of games that they could release inside that cabinet. So the first game that they released in this cabinet that they had all these extras of, that they couldn't make Rapid Fires because it didn't sell that well, was Mr. and Mrs. Pac-Man, which is actually a fun game. I really like it. It uses their squawk and talk, and whenever there's a little maze in the playfield, we've done a video of it too. There's a little maze in the playfield, and you're trying to get away from the ghosts, and if one of them catches you, it goes, "Gotcha!" in this real synthesized, deep voice, "Gotcha!" It's awesome. So anyway, if you look at the neck display baffle board of that one, you see it's got two displays, and then two displays, and then this middle one is off-center to the right. There's some art here, and so if a bulb was behind that art, it would illuminate Miss Pac-Man and Pac-Man running from the ghosts there. So that appears to be what this is. If you look, two displays on the right, two displays on the left. The one in the middle is off to the right a little bit, and there is a light bulb there that is probably what's used to illuminate Mr. and Mrs. Pac-Man. That would be my guess. Yeah, if you look at that bulb, it's general illumination lights. See how the other ones have a individual wire running to each one, blah, blah, blah. This one has two big heavy wires running each side. They've got it tied into the GI. So I think that's from a Mr. and Mrs. Pac-Man, which may be the same as 8 Ball Deluxe. We'll keep on looking. So the next game that they released using this same cabinet was 8 Ball Deluxe. I see something interesting. I won't mention it. It was 8 Ball Deluxe. And these are also rapid fire cabinets. You've got two displays over here, and then a display in the middle. And then you've got something here, and then two things on the top. I can't tell what it is because of the glare. Let's see if there's another picture. There we go. This is on the Internet Pinball Database. And there it shows you the original setup. So you see there was actually only one fluorescent bulb in the middle. The problem with that is they don't light up real great. They don't light up every part of it. Now, if it was still in there, I would just leave it like that. But going through all the trouble to hack that back in, not really worth it. And the customer wants it done differently. So he has bought LED strips that we're going to wire up to more evenly light the back glass. And then here is the neck. So there is the insert board. And it appears to be the one we've got. There's two displays on the left, two displays on the right, one in the middle, and then there's two baffles on the top and one baffle on the bottom right. But here's what I'm noticing. The head is bigger than the neck on 8 Ball Deluxe. I don't think ours is like that. So I hope this stuff fits. All right, I looked. Ours does have the head wider than the neck. It just I didn't know I didn't notice that, but going and looking, it looks right. Okay, so here is Centaur 2, and it looks like it's set up the same way. And ours actually has a tag on it that says Centaur 2. The only thing that I would be concerned about is these are 7-digit displays. We need to check to make sure 8 Ball Deluxe is 7-digit displays. But it looks like, you know, it's set up the same. So I think it's the baffle board on the displays is the same on Centaur 2 and 8 Ball Deluxe L.E. And this black plastic or whatever glass cover is the same too. So here's the flyer, and it does use 7-digit displays, so that's cool. I thought it did, because after a while they switched everything over to that. And they're actually the same size physically, so they'll fit, a 6 or a 7 will fit in, but the wiring harness is a little different. Okay, so I'm pretty confident we've got the right baffle board and all of that. So the next thing we need to do is figure out this problem with the ground wire that's missing or whatever from it. Okay, so I figured out another one of our mysteries. I was noticing in the previous video that on the left side of the box there appeared to be a spot for a board to mount, but there was no board mounted there. And we're trying to make sure that the harness is going to fit and everything. And so if you look on a Mr. and Mrs. Pac-Man, this is on the Internet Pinball Database, by the way, all these pictures, there is a board mounted over there, but it's not on 8 Ball Deluxe apparently. So that clears that up. And on Mr. and Mrs. Pac-Man, they had a metal door. Once I see all this stuff, I go, oh yeah, I remember that, but it's hard to keep it all in your head, you know. But there was a metal door. So apparently he had a Mr. and Mrs. Pac-Man head that he needed to make an 8 Ball Deluxe head because his 8 Ball Deluxe was screwed up. So he had someone create the neck, and then he used the Mr. and Mrs. Pac-Man head, but the board's wrong, because it's metal on Mr. and Mrs. Pac-Man, and it's that particle board or whatever on 8 Ball Deluxe. So we've got the actual original board from it, but it's all screwed up. So there was no ground trace for the lamps. Now remember, we've only got a cluster of lamps down here on ours, and there wasn't a ground trace on this because it's a metal plate. So this is Centaur 2. And so it was the last one they made, and if you look carefully you can see that there's lamps all over the place. That's because they did away with the fluorescent lamp idea. It was only on Rapid Fire, Mr. and Mrs. Pac-Man, and this 8 Ball Deluxe, but once they did Centaur 2, they went on to a more traditional way of mounting the lights. But if you look, see how the lights all have a metal wire running between them? Okay, so I just temporarily put the harness in there. We're not going to turn it on like this, of course. There's 2 back box connectors that plug into the power supply, and then it runs along the side. And if I remember correctly, on my Rapid Fire, it was kind of like that. The cables just kind of hung in the back. Of course, the playfield goes back, but there's plenty of room. And then on this particular one, there's only one plug for this entire display board. So if you look at the one we've got, which says Centaur 2 right on it here, not on that side, it says Centaur. This one has just one connector, which is what we're expecting. This Mr. and Mrs. Pac-Man one, which was the earlier game, actually has 3 connectors, which our harness can't handle, so we don't need that. So I think that's just for extra parts if you need it. I think he just had the top part of a Mr. and Mrs. Pac-Man. Okay, so it runs up, and that is what's going to plug in there. Very clean. And then there are 2 big connectors here, which are actually on the playfield. Okay, and then the power keeps running, or the lines keep running up. 2 of them plug into the MPU, and then a big old bundle of them runs over here. Now, we'll figure out better than that, but they're all plugged in where they go, so I'll figure out how to lay them all down where they're out of the way and everything's cool. I think this is right, but sometimes these boards on these particular games, well, on a lot of them, they'll mount upside down. So this one says auxiliary lamp driver. It may actually turn around and go the other way or something. It'd be nice if we had a picture. But I think we're about right. These two here for the lamp display, the lamp board, are also on the playfield. LDJ1, LDJ3. Almost all of them are labeled. The customer labeled them whenever he took them apart, so that's good. And then there's one from the other harness that we had earlier that comes all the way over. I got to check it, but I believe that plugs in there if I remember correctly. That's how the speaker is actually connected. The other end of the speaker wires are down there. And then we've got that other harness from the cabinet comes up to here and there, and you know, it all just goes where it goes. And these are the two solenoid driver board connectors that come from the power supply. So it's coming up as you would expect, and then they also go other places. But it all kind of laid back where it goes. Now, on these lamp things, there are these little sockets, and then what he was concerned about are these, the way they basically connect them all together with this little ground braid, basically. That stuff's kind of hard to solder too. I've messed with that before. It ain't fun. So this is the original board. You can see that it had a lot of water damage, which is why he replaced the head. And you can see that he had kind of a template of where the stuff needed to go, and he wrote down the wiring. Now if we look, it appears he's saying each one of those sockets is going to have two sides. It appears he's saying that the yellow and green wire went here, the gray and black here, the black and white here, the gray and brown here, and so on, which means all of these would have been connected together. So the one ground line will connect from socket to socket on the top there. And then on the bottom here, it looks like he's done the same thing. He's got green and orange, yellow and white, gray and white, and then it says blue. So that likely goes here and then back up to here would be what I guess. So there was probably one line that went, well, I don't know, you can almost see the dirt, can't you? So maybe the blue wire connected there and went down here, stopped here, and then it went around where you see that little dirt line up to here, was stapled in, and then ran straight down, and then stopped here at this staple. I think that's what happened. So we need a wire from this staple along the top of these holes to over about here, past that hole, and then to run down the top as well. And then we connect the blue wire to it, and that will make all of that the ground for the lights. Actually, it's the voltage for the lights. The board grounds them, but either way. So he's got this big clump of them here. I just kind of popped them in place, and it does look like they lay out in there, kind of. I've got that legend to go by there. And you can see that the blue wire, like he said, connects to one of the lamps, and then you have these little ground wires running off of that. Now it's all screwed up, which is why he recognized this was going to be a problem. It's not going to be that big of a problem. Okay, so I think he's got some stuff in the bag down here that he was going to attempt to do it with. Alright, so he's got some ground braid here. You use this in the cabinet. There's some of this actually in the cabinet. And he's got some desoldering braid here, which actually works the same way. That could work too. But that stuff is thinner, you know, it doesn't need to be that big. Whoa! The lights are going out. Whoa! George? I think George is here with us. it doesn't need to be that big. So what I usually use is like picture hanging wire. The wire that you put on the back of a picture frame to hang it on the wall. That works pretty good. But you can use anything. You just need an exposed wire that you can easily solder to each socket. All right, folks. So on Saturdays, I always go to the flea market. Now, I overpaid for these, but I needed some 9-volt batteries for a little thing that we have to test here at the shop, right? And while I was at the flea market, I was looking through this guy's stuff, and he had this. He had a roll of this. He had a big tub that had a bunch of these in it, but there was only one left. It was like it was sitting there waiting on me, right? And it said utility wire, $1. So I bought his roll of utility wire. Now it's kind of stiff, right? And I'll be darned if that doesn't look exactly like the stuff that's on some of these pinball machines. Some of it's braided, multi-strand, and some of it's just one strand, like this. So it's just stiff wire. Now the problem you would run into is, can you solder it to the switches, right? The sockets, right? Now you can't use solder because if it gets hot, it would just melt. Right? But doesn't this stuff look like it's going to work perfect? But can you solder to it? Yes, you can. Yes, that's right. You can solder to it. So I think we'll just use this. But I need something to staple it to the board, like, staple it back on the light baffle, we'll call it. So I've got this electric stapler. It's an Arrow. I'm using 1/4-inch staples, and I'm just trying to pull it as tight as I can. Bam, bam. I'm just going to put it back exactly like it was. So it started here. You can see it ran pretty close to the top of the hole, straight across. Got to here, and then hooked up, and then did the same thing up here. And that would have been the last staple holding it there. All right, so this is our little legend showing where each wire goes. You could also figure this out from the schematics pretty easily. So I have stapled the wire on, and then I took the sockets that were still soldered to the harness and took those all loose. Okay, and then I pulled all the staples from the sockets off and took the solder off of them. And then popped them back into the board and stapled them in place. So whenever I touch that up with solder, we're basically trying to get that pin to connect to the wire. These ones down here I had to put a little crooked because these holes are just slightly closer to the edge of the board than these were. You can see where they had stapled them underneath. But if I did that, they hung down just a little bit too low. So I don't know, maybe the hole is smaller slightly or something, but it doesn't matter. No big deal at all. So I just turned them a little bit, and it gave me plenty of room. Wham! There we went. Okay, so now I'm going to solder the wire to all of the sockets. All right, folks, so I got them back in. Fixed that. Now we don't know if they work yet because I can't turn it on because we haven't worked through everything else yet. But those can't turn on unless the lamp driver board turns them on. And so we still got a little bit of ways to go before we can do that. However, I feel confident that they'll work. So we fixed that. That was the part that the customer was the most worried about. He was afraid that was going to be like a really big deal. It's not that big of a deal. The staple gun really helps. If you've got that staple gun where you can just wham, throw that thing in there, you're good. Now, the thing about these sockets, these are not the greatest sockets. You might be tempted to swap those out for another type. Even a type maybe that holds 47 bulbs or something like that. These sockets always had a kind of a bad rep as not being the greatest. But I've been able to get them to work just fine, so I think they'll be all right. So there you go. So we got that done. Now next time, we'll work through the displays. We'll work through the solenoid board. We'll get it to where we can at least light some stuff up and just see if we can get the thing to come back to us a little bit. But I think that was probably the biggest problem that was left on the machine. If you, I don't know if we mentioned it earlier in this video, but essentially what happened was he got one of these and the top part of it was just destroyed. So he had some new wood made, and he's basically trying to save this machine. And he's done a really good job on the playfield so far. And hopefully that will get that light baffle, that light board to work just fine. Now we still have to, we're going to have to mount some LED strips up here to light up the display of the back glass, but that won't be any big deal. So we'll mess with that next time maybe, or we'll mess with the boards. Leave your comments below. Let us know what you think so far. Make sure to give us a thumbs up for taking the trouble to film it for you. We hope you enjoyed it. We have a new channel if you didn't hear about it. I've been doing some videos on the weekend called Amateur Repair Time, where just kind of as a hobby, I've been working on old clocks and old radios and old phonographs and stuff like that, stuff that I enjoy. And kind of the point of all of that is we're trying to show people that this old technology and this cool vintage stuff that we all kind of agree is interesting and better than the stuff that you can buy now even. Most of it you can fix if you take the time to attempt it, so Amateur Repair Time's all about that. I don't really know how to fix clocks, but I see a broken clock, I'm gonna try to take the thing apart and fix it, or a radio or whatever, and as we go along we learn a little bit. Now on these pinball machine videos, that's kind of been what I've been trying to get across to people. If you've got a broken machine, here's kind of how they work. Take yours apart and figure out what's wrong with it. I can't fix every pinball machine in the world. This one's from St. Albans, West Virginia, which is a little far away, but I grew up right around the corner from there. So, so I guess I can fix them within 3 or 4 hours of here. But other than that, y'all are going to have to fix them. So you're going to have to be an amateur pinball repairman or woman yourself. So make sure to check out that channel if you're interested in that. We don't do pinball machines, arcade games, or jukeboxes over there. It's just vintage stuff, like I said. Old clocks, old radios, old record players, things like that. Amateur Repair Time. You can just type it in the top of YouTube and you'll see my channel pop up. Or we have a link on our channel and down below this video probably, and blah, blah, blah. It's all over the place. And last but not least, don't ever forget, keep them close to your heart always. My brother Donnie. My brother has his own channel here on YouTube. I work on arcade games, pinball machines, and jukeboxes with my brother Joey. And then our brother Donnie, the channel's called My Brother Donnie. My brother Donnie works on old buildings, old vehicles, mobile homes, and he has a farm. So there's cows and goats involved. So go check that out if you get a chance and you're interested in that. I'm over there with him on his channel a lot, but we will see you back here in a couple days where we'll continue working on this beautiful, gorgeous Bally 8 Ball Deluxe limited edition pinball machine. Hope you enjoyed it.